However, today's webinar is entitled The Best Years of Your Life by Bike. And we have a great lineup of speakers to discuss how to facilitate children walking and cycling to school. So I'd like to introduce our three speakers today, and if they could hold up their hands when I call them. So first off, we have Jane Hackett. She's the Senior Program Manager with Antashka's Green Schools. Next, we have Antonia Martin. She's the Communications and Promotion Officer, as well as part of the COVID mobility measures team with Dublin City Council. And then we also have Andrew Nolan. He's the Fingal County Council, and he is the Senior Executive Engineer for Operations. I would also like to welcome Connor Cahill. He was just speaking. He's with Dublin Cycling Campaign, as well as Vinnie Myler, and he's also with Dublin Cycling Campaign. And they are the coordinators of this really fantastic series of webinars that have been happening this week. So thank you to them both. As Connor mentioned earlier, so my name is Cynthia O'Mahony. I'm an Antashka Climate Ambassador for 2020, and I'm also studying environmental sustainability in UCD, and I'm a member of DLR Cycling Campaign. More importantly, I'm a parent of 3 teenagers, and I want them to be able to cycle safely to and from wherever they want to go. And I would love it for other kids to be able to do the same. So without further ado, we will get started with Jane. She will be talking to us about Green Schools travel and how to support change, and looking at the program of school zones. So Jane, thank you very much for joining us today, and you are very welcome. Looking forward to your talk.
Great. Thanks a million, Cynthia. Just will share my screen now, and hopefully all of this works. So just to say thanks a million for inviting me on. It's great to have all these events going. I am an avid cyclist and have my 3 kids cycling. And it's the first time now this September that my 2 daughters, who are aged 11, are attempting to cycle in the cycle lanes. So we're having kind of great fun in the morning, you can imagine. But just to say thanks, and it's lovely to see all the people in the chat, actually recognize a lot of them. So look, I'm going to do it really, really quickly. Just to say a little bit about Green Schools. We are an environmental education and action program, and we're really about holistic sustainability in schools. We've been running for 20 years in Ireland, and there's a whole raft of subject matters we look after. The one I manage is the travel team, and we are sponsored by the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport, and supported by the NTA. So that's what our mission really is, to get more and more kids actively traveling to school. So the background to the School Zone project, really it has come around about because Green Schools have developed walkability audits, and those audits are looking at walkability around schools. And the key aim of those was to have an inclusive approach so that children who are using our infrastructure, their infrastructure on a daily basis, have an avenue with which they can take part in how their towns and cities are designed. So the walkability audit is a great tool, and what we've done over the last 10 years is audit routes in nearly 1,600 schools. So we have a huge amount of data, and what we do with that is we submit it to local authorities, and where there is capacity in local authorities, whether or not it's people's capacity or money, they have been able to implement changes outside the school. And there's a few examples of some infrastructural improvements. So look, we wanted to build on this, and over the last number of years, we've really wanted to identify spaces outside schools that have an identity, that aren't just the same as everywhere else. We want to make sure that children have a safe space outside school, and it's a recognized template for children so that they have greater access when it comes to walking and cycling. And so what we did last year was we kind of invested in our own capacity, and we decided we need an infrastructural officer to liaise with the local authorities. So Trevor came on board. Trevor's on holiday. But Trevor's role really is to liaise with local authorities, to build on what we have done, and to capture, evidence at the school gate and build a picture of nationally what walkability is like. at some point we want to be able to show where the best spots are in terms of permeability and accessibility around schools, and also where the spots are, where the pinch points are, what needs to be improved. So what we came up with, we wanted to develop the school zone template. We had all these amazing ideas. We wanted color, or we wanted rainbows, and we wanted everything to look like a space for children. You know, we are kind of, that's the way we think. But then we also exist in the real world, and we know that, you know, you can't get all your wishes, but you have to work with the people on the ground who can implement these, you know, and the engineers have their own suite of rules and regulations and guidance that they have to fit within. So we were trying to blend the two, and we got to, we know the NTA have been a great supporter of ours, and we've been working then with Finola in the NTA, who brought on board Brady Shipman Martin to develop up this conceptual design stage. So the conceptual design stage came about in spring of this year, and we had a good few options, and we wanted to have a playful look. Look, it's somewhat watered down from the original idea, but it is much more, I suppose, appropriate for what local authorities can achieve. We'd love to build on it more and maybe make it a little bit more ambitious, but at the minute, this is the template that we're working off. So then, of course, COVID came, so we had to kind of pause on our dreams of a school zone. However, we had been speaking to the local authorities, and we'd identified 30 schools appropriate for the school zone feature. So as part of the COVID response, we put together a support document for schools, which was looking at the front of school, because obviously principals were worried about how congestion would impact upon their social distancing. So all of this kind of fed into a greater kind of support for front of school gate measures. So we did some surveys with our network, and the school principals came back very much saying that the challenges they had are what you should expect, you know, and we all know this, but it's good to get the information from the principals and to get them thinking about it. So it was drop-off congestion, not enough, you know, segregation, especially around cyclists, traffic speed, and all of the things that we are, you know, looking at in green schools anyway. We also asked, what sort of measures are you going to support? You know, because we need their support. We don't want the kickback. And they obviously, a big one is traffic speeds, which we're very much supportive of the Love 30 campaign, and we talk about that. But they're also, they were looking at front of school gate issues, really restricting car parking and reducing vehicle traffic space, which was fantastic. So what we did is we fed it back then to the local authorities. We gave each of the local authorities, you know, this data. We broke it down according to their local authority area and the schools in their counties. And then we also gave them the response document. So also, if anybody's interested, that's where the document is. It's on our Green Schools website. It's free for anybody to use. And it looks at some very soft kind of informal interventions, and then also looks at kind of the much more, you know, difficult ones, like the school streets, and also the kind of harder infrastructural measures. So just really, I suppose, coming back to our original idea of the school zones, you know, it did come out of the walkability audit. And as you can see here, this is the first school zone, which was Francis Street, CBS. And like in 2019, we did the walkability audit, and one of their recommendations was to create a colourful, distinctive school zone to alert drivers of the school location. So Antonio and her colleagues in Dublin City Council would have received this, and obviously we were in communication with DCC about all of this. So look, to wrap it up, I suppose we need to build on the successes of the two that have been put in. We're communicating with local authorities all around the country, and I know the NTA are very supportive of this initiative, so we're really hoping more of these become a reality. And as well, we're also building on our walkability audit toolkit. So we have it now as a digital version, and we will be able to really have a much more up-to-date and user-friendly kind of report for the engineers and the local authorities to act upon. So finally, all I'd say is, we celebrate the success in green schools. And as they say, from school zones to ice cream cones, that's what this little boy, St. Francis CBS, has had. But the big thing is the schools that have implemented the school zones have really come back and have been very supportive of it. So I just want to say thanks to DCC and the NTA for supporting us. And that's it for me. If you want any more information, just get in touch. Thanks a lot.
That's brilliant, Jane. Thank you very much for that presentation. That was great. A few questions coming in, but we're going to save all the questions till after all of the speakers have had a chance to give their presentations. So next we're going to move on to Antonia Martin from Dublin City Council, and she's also going to be talking about the school mobility program. So Antonia, if you want to go ahead and share your presentation, and thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks, Cynthia. Hello, everybody.
I'll just start sharing it now. So just
thanks,
a second.
Connor.
Yeah. Share. So are people able to see that now?
I can see 2 slides in one, which we
okay.
can.
Sorry. Right. Okay. Right. Okay.
Perfect.
Is that okay? Right. Okay. Great.
That's the one. Okay, so thanks for the intro, Cynthia. So yeah, I'm Antonia. I'm with Dublin City Council. So currently in the COVID mobility team, and prior to COVID, I was working in the Sustainable Mobility and Projects division. So we had been, I suppose, kind of engaged with walking and cycling projects previously. And obviously due to COVID, we're involved in the more emergency and the quick measures that are going in. But I'm going to chat to you today about the school's mobility and kind of, I suppose, where it came from. So I'll be kind of touching, kind of just following on from Jane's presentation there. So I'll pop on to the next one there, Connor, if that's all right.
Okay.
Perfect. So I suppose just kind of a statement that sums it up really from the CEO of the Road Safety Authority around congestion at school gates, and the result is incredibly dangerous. Small children weaving in and out of parked and moving cars at the school gate, many of whom are too small to be seen by the drivers pulling in and out. So it kind of really just tells you that, that when you think of the small kids there trying to get into school and the amount of cars at the school gates, it's just a huge problem. I was checking in with our engineers yesterday and today to see if anyone had a picture to really kind of show the real problem and show the kids and the cars. And the response, I'm afraid, though, was that they try not to lurk at school gates with cameras. So I didn't get that particular good shot to show the hazards, but we've plenty of the more the better shots to come. But I'll carry on to the next slide, Connor. Thanks. So just to give you an idea of, I suppose, what was happening pre-COVID, we did have a working group in Dublin City Council, and we'd linked in with, we'd have a couple of chats with Green Schools as well about, establishing the Safe Routes to School kind of program and what could we do. So we were doing a bit of research on that. But the list here will just show you, I suppose, where our information is coming from. So obviously Dublin City Council have area engineers, and we were getting requests in via those that tag team, the traffic advisory group, request there what could be done outside schools. And we had the Green Schools walkability audits coming in. We had information coming in from our area offices, councillor questions, area committees. Shane and Betta was doing, he did a school street request to see where the interest was coming from there. We had direct contact from schools and parents. And then we also had kind of that initial, the concept that Jane went through there with the school zone concept that the NTA and Green Schools were working on. So pre-COVID, I suppose we were compiling all this. We were looking at different initiatives out there, and we were trying to see where we could best support making the school routes safer. So that's where we were at pre-COVID. And then if we just carry on there, Connor, thanks. So obviously COVID hit. And the onus initially was on, the city centre, the routes into the city centre, creating more walking and cycling space there. But also in the document was also mentioned that we would be doing a school mobility program. So we quickly had to see, look, where we were at and what could be implemented quickly. So on top of the sources of information we had already, we then had additional information coming via our COVID mobility request form. So we were kind of searching for anything that mentioned schools in those forms. And then we took the information from the Green Schools National Survey. So 11 of the Dublin schools had come back through that. So we had an enormous amount of information, and we were looking to see, look then where we would get started. So, or I suppose the best way to get started really was the thing. So if we follow on, Conor, please. So basically we had that information, that school zone concept that had come from the NTA and the Green Schools. So we had another meeting then with the NTA and Green Schools around that, and where it was fitting before was it was fitting with our Sustainable Mobility Project team, because the original concept, I suppose you could have pedestrian crossings in there, and some raised tables as you enter the school zone, but for the COVID mobility measures, I suppose they would take a bit longer to engage. So the initial meeting was around what can we take out of the school zone design concept that could be a COVID mobility measure that then can be enhanced via our sustainable mobility team, you know, as their resources were capable. So but what could we do quickly? But so regarding a school zone then, obviously the design concepts were developed by Green Schools in partnership with the NTA. But it's a set of design features introduced to assist in creating a safer, calmer, and more attractive environment. So the key things are that there be a gateway at the main entrance of the school zone. The area will be demarcated by specific colour circles on the road surface. With keep clear markings, and then pencil-shaped bollards to prevent illegal parking in the vicinity of the school entrances. So I know we say pencil bollards, but these are actually in the shape of a pencil. So these three things we took out of it, and we said actually that can go in under a COVID mobility measure. And the Green Schools and NTA had already identified 2 schools that would be, I suppose, ones that would be quick to get started on, that wouldn't be that would be very supportive of it. So that's where we started. And just to distinguish, I know Andrew's coming up next. So a school zone, they're different from school streets. So in a school street, traffic is banned during drop-off and pick-up time, and that's not the case in a school zone. I suppose it's encouraged that there is no drop-off and pick-up, and there's no idling, I suppose, in that space. And then the pencil bollards would stop that illegal parking on the footpaths, but traffic can still go through. So from our end and from a COVID mobility end, it was quicker to implement that, and not so much consultation would be required. So we'll pop on to the next one. Yeah, so here's an aerial view of the one that was implemented on Francis Street, and we'll have some closer up views later on in the presentation, but you can see that row of nice pencil bollards, and I suppose that, you know, they really do look like pencils, and the colourful markings, and the idea is that, and you can see the kind of gateway sign at the end there, saying the school zone on it. You know, it's different than, I suppose, what's out there already with the kind of the jagged yellow lines outside the school, and it just makes it more colourful, and hopefully you know, it's to alert the drivers that actually, look, this is different, to encourage them to slow down. So that's what the Francis Street one, that's an idea of what they look like, but each area, outside each school, they all have to be done, designed specifically to suit that particular location. Yeah, so the objectives, so to highlight the presence of the school and students to drivers, to discourage vehicle drop-off pickup at school gates, which will reduce congestion and air pollution, encourage drivers to slow down via specific and eye-catching traffic calming measures, increase safety at the front of the school by preventing parked or stopped cars from blocking visibility of pedestrians crossing, to make it easier for school children to cycle to school by keeping the school zone clear. And it's really prioritising, we hope to prioritise and increase active travel to and from school. So if we carry on. So just the criteria, I suppose, because not every school would be suitable for a school zone. So we were looking for roads with some link roads. So identified in the design manual for urban roads and streets. so local roads and link roads, roads with one lane or less of traffic in either direction. So for example, maybe the schools on the Ballymun Road wouldn't be suitable because you're crossing 2 lanes. So if you had lots of coloured around that area, it might give the kids false sense of safety. But so it had to be on a quieter road. Where illegal parking was an issue, where the speeds are of 30 kilometers are desirable, which all of us agree would be really all the streets. But as we know, like some are still in that 50, and cars are going at that speed, so they're not suitable at the moment for a school zone. Or where the streets are already the 30 kilometers per hour. So they're the type of school locations where a school zone would be suitable. Next. So that's just our launch at Francis Street. The Lord Mayor came down, and it was the day before school started back. So Trevor in Green Schools was well engaged with the school, and these kids were involved with the walkability audit previously. So apparently they were quite happy to put on the school uniform a day early. They'd had enough time off school. So it was great to have them out, and really good engagement from the principal and the staff in St. Francis School. So the next one, I think I've got another few pictures. So this is the Central Model School. So this was our second pilot, which is in Dublin 1, just off Gardner Street, and that just again shows the pencil bollards close up. So this was a point, I suppose it's a cul-de-sac, but where there would have been a lot of cars kind of driving straight up to the school gate and turning. So it's really preventing people from doing that now. So carry on. So just showing the entrance to the Central Model School then as well, and just showing that school zone sign at the start of it. Now these two projects are both with our Sustainable Mobility and Projects team, so they're going to be looking to do more long-term interventions on these. So there'll probably be a raised table and just some more physically calming measures going in there. But these were as I said, the COVID mobility starter interventions.
We're just a little beyond 8 minutes now, but anyway, Grant, I think you're near the end.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're doing great.
I'm nearly there.
Yeah.
Grant, so we'll go to the next one, thanks. Yeah. Okay, so just some feedback from schools there, from Francis Street School. So they were really, really pleased with the interventions, and we'll be following up with them, and as will Green Schools, just to see how they're getting on with the kids in those schools. Next one there, Connor, please. So the next steps, I suppose, after that, like we had the physical evidence, we could show what it looked like. We wrote to all the primary schools in Dublin City Council area, inviting them to complete an expression of interest. We've had 59 requests so far, so our engineers are looking at those. But we're also looking at them in tandem with the requests that had come in previously. And, you know, we're really seeing, look, where have there been big issues all along, and where have we got good engagement from teachers and from parents and from the local area. Because we're going to start with the schools where the need is the most. So that's how it's happening at the moment. We have 4 schools signed off that they're going next, so they should be done in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll be aiming for about 4 per week after that. But they all do still need to be safety assessed on an individual basis, and the design will be a little bit different in each one. So that's the next steps for the school zone. I'll just get you, Connor, to quickly go on to the next one, just to give you an idea of the other initiatives, because as I said, school zones aren't suitable for all schools. So there's some other initiatives that we're looking at. There's a cycle track both ways of Griffith Avenue going in. It's 3.5k there from Ballygall Road east to Malahide Road. There's a lot of schools and obviously Griffith College along that route. So we're hoping that will get enable more children to walk and cycle to school there. There's a couple of filtered permeability trials gone in. Grange Gorman in particular, the D7 school there is benefiting from that. And when TU Dublin go back, that's stopping vehicles going through that zone, so making it safer for everybody to walk and cycle there. We're offering, we've funding from the NTA to give school cycle parking. So we've 63 requests at the moment. We've 8 gone out already. We've a batch to come in to support 50 more schools, and then we'll get the next batch. So school parking, if the schools have the space for them, can go in. We're supporting a number of cycling buses. That picture there of Green Lanes cycle bus, which has started up recently, so that's brilliant. We're trying to identify areas for park and stride where schools want to do, I suppose, get more parking away from the school gate. We have online resources, so lots of links, a lot of them to the Green Schools resources and stuff, and we'd love to build that. So if anyone's got more resources that we can direct people to, we're very happy, and we'd love to put that up on our website as well. And then in some cases, schools have requested disabled parking bays, and always kind of happy to put them in where we can to facilitate anyone who may have mobility issues. So I think the rest of the slides, Conor, is just some photographs. So that's the Grange Gorman, as you can see.
We'll kind of clip through these now very quickly.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. And I think that's it. Okay, thank you very much. So just some the link to the website, and you can email us at covidmobility@dublincity.ie.
Okay, thanks, Antonia.
Thank you.
That was brilliant, Antonia. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was great. So next up we have Andrew Nolan. He's from Fingal County Council. He's the Senior Executive Engineer for Operations, and he's going to be discussing school streets, which, as Antonia mentioned, is different than school zones. And he's going to be talking about a project in Malahide that was started last year. So you're very welcome, Andrew.
Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for attending the seminar today. I'll just share my screen here for everybody. Give me a second. Okay, can you all see that?
Yeah, Andrew, if you want to turn off your video, just so as we make sure the audio is coming through okay, then just in case there's any reception issues, and if you just want to hit, if you want to hit F5 or play the presentation, yeah. Sorry, yeah, perfect.
Okay, you see that, yeah?
Bingo, yep,
okay,
perfect,
so
thanks.
We started the school streets last year in October 2019, yeah, it was the first of its kind in Ireland. So, taking the initiative from some schools that were done in Scotland and the UK, it was originally trialled in Italy, actually. So, just to say that the rationale behind it is that we're obviously faced with a lot of road safety risks around the place, and the incredibly dangerous situation that exists for small children at schools, with the concentration of cars and vulnerable road users, and some of our most vulnerable road users at schools where there's often high density, up to 900 pupils in some schools and more. And if you look at the demographics where we had, or statistics I should say, where in 2011 there was 50% of primary school children were being driven to school by car in Fingal. That rose in 2016 to 67%, and by 2018 was up at 79%. So you can see that this problem isn't exactly going away, and is only getting worse. So I think it's incumbent on us to do something about it and try to encourage people to take a different mode of transport other than being dropped to school by car. So 51% of secondary school children are being driven less than 1 kilometre to school, which again, it makes children car dependent. They're less physically active, causes the obesity epidemic that we're all aware of. Climate action is obviously a significant issue as well. Increasing instances of extreme weather events such as Storm Ophelia, Lorenzo, etc., that have happened over the last few years, Storm Emma, etc. In terms of where it's located, the school streets is on a short section of road here at St. Oliver Plunkett School. This is Malahide village itself, so you may be familiar with New Street in Malahide, and the main section through the Diamond in Malahide. This brings you out to the coast. So the school is just off the main intersection in Malahide itself. Up the road here, there's 900 odd students in St. Oliver Plunkett's. St. Oliver Plunkett's then there's another school adjacent to it called St. Andrews that has about 220 school children in it as well. So this area alone has upwards of 1,100 children attending school pretty much all at the same time in the morning. So the issues that were there at St. Oliver Plunkett's basically was that we had school gate congestion. These two photographs that you can see in the slides are taken from Grove Road outside of the school prior to us implementing the school streets issue. And you can see that there's, on the upper picture, you can see that there's pedestrians and parents trying to squeeze, or school children and parents trying to squeezed between cars and a wall, where they have buggies, etc., trying to get through that location, or bikes or scooters. It's an unacceptable situation. You've got cars pulling in and pulling out while kids are trying to cross the road. We had a number of issues with our school warden where people were breaching or crossing directly outside of the school because they were in a hurry or not paying attention, whatever the case is. You've also got on the bottom lower right-hand picture, you can see that in a road that has 2 lanes of traffic on it, it's on a bend and there's continuous double yellow lines on both sides. There's a solid white line in the middle, which means that you shouldn't be straddling the white line. But what you actually have is you've got a van parked on the inside on a footpath, blocking the footpath. You've got a line of parked cars then blocking the footpath, the verge and the road. You've got an SUV travelling across the centre of the white line, and on the opposite side you've got a car straddling the footpath to get around the car that's approaching it, because you've got a 2-way flow of traffic. And which you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, there's also a car parked on the bottom right-hand corner of that picture as well, blocking that side of the road also. So in effect, the road was essentially down to about 1 running lane of traffic. So you've got school gate congestion, illegal parking, blocking double yellow line, parking double yellow lines, rat running traffic, poor visibility for parents and children, U-turning traffic. So the cars were U-turning in the middle of the road to go back the way they came. And that in itself had caused an accident just prior to us implementing school streets. So while we were planning it, there was a child knocked down on the rise with a car reversing, and only for the child had a bag on his back. It could have been a lot worse than it was. And you've also got the obvious road safety risks that go with all of that, but you've got cars idling directly outside of the school, highly congested environment with kids, but also with traffic. So the principles of school streets, we developed this logo for the school streets situation so that we can run this out and expand it across not only the county, but can be taken on board by other local authorities. But the 3 principles are road safety, climate action, and healthy and sustainable travel. In terms of the location, what we have there is on Grove Road, which is the road directly outside of the school. This is the section that we pedestrianised. So we pedestrianised it from 8:30 a.m. to 9:15 to accommodate the teachers getting into school, and then the lag after the initial time that they need to be at by 9 o'clock, so that you're making sure that everybody's in and the area is still sterilised. But then the wardens then remove the bollards and traffic can proceed through. And again, then at 1 o'clock to 2:45, so you've got the early let out time for the junior infants, classes, senior infants, and again at the more senior cycle kids. It was term time only on Monday to Friday, so you weren't impacting on residents or businesses in the area outside of the actual school times. It's initially on a trial basis for 18 months, so we're currently monitoring road safety, air quality, traffic congestion, volumes, the environment overall, pupil and parent behaviours. So you see that changing through the course. As changes happen, you see people behaving in accordance with the requirements, and then they fall back into bad habits, coming the wrong way up the one-way street or doing U-turns in the middle of the road, and that all has to be reinforced with communications and signage, etc., which is something that we've been keeping an eye on there. In terms of the implementation, then we introduced it with signage to inform drivers. With bollards that they're coffin bollards, they're called, where you bury them into the road, and the school wardens can actually lift them up out of the road so that they're able to manage the area that's closed, so that if there's a blue light situation or somebody has to get in for whatever reason, there's residents living on that road as well, that can be accommodated. We used the school wardens that were present. There was 2 school wardens at that location, so we used the existing school wardens to operate that system, and then we supplemented that with another school warden so that we could have a safe operating procedure. Longer term, we'd be looking at doing something less manual and more controlled. The parking wardens also carried out a significant amount of enforcement around the area, so people got used to the change that was happening. The initial phases of it, people just seen it as being closed. They were pulling up on double yellow lines and adjacent carriageways, going the wrong way up the one-way system that we put in. So our parking enforcement wardens and Garda Síochána were of great assistance in terms of getting people to realise that it's no longer tolerable to park on footpaths or park on double yellow lines or come the wrong way up a one-way system. It was heavily enforced initially so that people would realise that there is a change in place. In terms of the support measures that we put in, then we put in park and stride zones from the adjacent car parks. So I'll show you where they were, or where they are. We put in walking buses, we put in drop-off zones. We revised the whole traffic system from the arrangement of roads there into a one-way system. We provided parking permits using the logo for the school streets logo that you can see in the top left-hand corner there. We issued out we issued over, I think it was about 2,000 of them to both schools, St Andrews and St Oliver Plunkett's, to the parents and guardians of the children. So that permitted them to have 2 hours free parking in Malahide as long as they were parking legally. And that encouraged them to one, park legally, two, park in a designated parking spot that was maybe not immediately adjacent to the school, and three, it gave them the opportunity then to use the facilities in the town of Malahide so that they were actually bringing business to the village itself. We carried out some upgrades to the Diamond Junction, which is the main junction in the middle of the village, so it was operating on Moog that had previously been operating on a vehicle actuated system. So we upgraded that so there was a more intelligent reaction to the traffic demand that was coming out. We carried out repairs to the pedestrian infrastructure, added yellow boxes and different arrangements of road markings. We increased the parking enforcement. We were looking at putting bollards in on Church Road, but because of the enforcement levels that we introduced, people started to behave in the correct manner, started adhering to the double yellow lines and not parking on footpaths. And that cleaned up the whole problem that St Andrews were experiencing, which is the smaller school on the Church Road adjacent to the road that we actually pedestrianised. We put in a new pedestrian link from Rob's Wall, which is an estate on the far side of Malahide, on the eastern side of it, and that provided a shorter route for pedestrians to get to school. And then we added additional bike parking as well. So again, just to show you, the park and stride locations were put in. The significant levels of car parking around Malahide, the 672 car parking spaces in Malahide itself. So they were everybody was permitted to park in those with a 2 hour free parking permit pass. Then we have Bridgefield Car Park, which is on the upper left-hand corner, coloured in orange. We have the lower car park, back road car park, again coloured in orange by the railway line there. And we have Seabanks Car Park, which is on the far right-hand side of that image that you can see. All of those car parks are within a 14-minute walk. They're less. Like Bridgefield is 9 minutes from the school, back road is 10 minutes, and Seabanks is 14 minutes walk. And that's walking at a child's pace as opposed to walking at an adult's pace. So we made sure that what we were requesting the parents and children to do wasn't unreasonable. We introduced bike sharing into Malahide as well, so we brought the bleeper bikes in so that there were bikes available for people. We introduced bike parking and so on so that they were able to take a bike from anywhere near their vicinity where they live and cycle to the school or vice versa. And we supported walking and cycling buses from the park and stride location. So we had walking buses from each of the 3 car parks, initially set up by our school wardens and then left over them to the parents and so on to take that on board. There's still one operating from Bridgefield Car Park. So this is when we introduced it. You can see the bollards that we introduced. These are the coffin bollards that you can see in the middle of the signs that we have with the parking wardens. And these were introduced and they were very effective initially. In hindsight, they've not been as durable as we had been given the indication that they would be, so we're looking at a replacement for them at the moment. But ultimately, they work very well. They fall back down into the ground, you can lift them up using a key, and they have been very effective. But it means that people then see the bollards, they know that they can't stop there, and as well as that, we put them right out on the edge line of the road where it meets Church Road, and at the far end, so you weren't having that conflict between cars pulling in, doing a drop-off at that location, or providing them with an area where they could do a drop-off. Again, remove the conflict from the area directly in front of where your highest congregation of pupils and traffic could potentially be. So moving on then, we introduced a bike port into one of the car parking spaces on the road. So this shows like where before you would have had a single car park, you now had the capacity for 10 bikes to be stored at that location in an area that was entirely pedestrianised. The drop-off zones were provided on Church Road, which is the road outside of the school zone itself. And this allowed a set-down area both for St Andrews and St Oliver Plunkett's, which meant that whole situation was far more regularised in terms of people stopping and pulling in on the curb or on double yellow lines to drop off. So now they had a dedicated set-down area, and it worked very, very well both on Church Road and on Grove Road, which is the bottom right-hand picture. We, as I said, introduced the walking buses. They were very successful and are still in operation. And just on that slide there, you can see we also added some road markings as well for the walking routes for the kids coming from each of the car parks to the schools.
Andrew, just to let you know, you're kind of on. You're just hit time, but keep going anyway. But yeah, we want to leave some time for Q&A as well. But I'm please continue. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, that's the Rob's Wall connection. So we shortcutted what was a 3-kilometre walk to the school from Rob's Wall, or a drive for that matter. down to a 2-kilometre walk from the school. So significant difference that provided people with a route that they could cycle or walk. And we carried out a significant amount of surveys. You can see in the top right-hand picture, which was the before scenario outside of the school, and the bottom picture, which is after we implemented the school street. So a significant improvement to the area. The surveys we carried out were traffic surveys, parking, pedestrian and cycle surveys. We did a drone survey, and we carried out nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter at 2.5 micrograms. Mode share, you can see before and after results there, where it went from essentially 37% were being dropped to school by car, dropped to 18%, and for walking we had about a 50% increase, and not just walking, but walking, cycling and scooting, we had about a 50% increase in people taking a more sustainable form of transport. Car traffic, this was the before situation, so you had 300 odd cars in the zone around Grove Road itself. The various other arms of each of the local routes around there are all shown, and that didn't show any significant increases. But you can see that it went from being, we did a 25% drop there, a 1% increase on the northbound traffic, which is nominal. But overall, we had a 23% drop in the traffic on Church Road. And then if you look at Grove Road, we went from having 300 vehicles directly outside of the school at drop-off and collection times down to 0 vehicles. And again, no significant changes really at the diamond. Nitrogen dioxide levels, as I said, we've seen significant reductions there. We had a 20% reduction in the air pollution around the school. One thing that keeps getting foisted, or was foisted at us throughout this, was people need to be dropped to school. They have to take a car to school because of the climate issues and issues with rain in Ireland, and it always rains in Ireland. And maybe for the majority of the country that's not incorrect, but when you look at Dublin and you compare it to any other major city that you have cycling and walking as part of their day-to-day existence, you can see that Dublin is this green patch here, and the way it was described to me by Joanna Donnelly from Met Éireann was that the Dublin Mountains Act, or the Wicklow Mountains Act, as an umbrella for Dublin. So what you end up getting is Dublin is quite similar to the likes of Belgium and the Netherlands in terms of rainfall events. And when you drill into that a little bit more, you can see that Dublin has about 100 millimetres less rainfall than the likes of the Netherlands per annum. So the statement that we get more rain than anywhere else isn't true, and other countries that are known for cycling can do it with the same kind of weather events. This is what it looked like before on the top right-hand picture, and this is what it looks like now. So you can see there's quite substantial changes and a far more enticing environment and safer environment for children. Church Road, which is the adjacent road on the west side of St Andrews, had this scenario on the top left-hand picture. And after we introduced school streets, we had this scenario on the drop-off and collection times outside St Andrews. Again, congestion on the footpath, cars parked on the footpath, clear footpaths. And similarly there, where the traffic warden is crossing children across the road, she actually said that it was amazing for her since we introduced it, and it was a lot safer. Various responses from people that were affected. One from the principal, it is helping to develop independence and confidence as children are no longer dropped at the gate by their parents. They're more alert and ready to learn, having had fresh air and exercise. One of the parents' mornings are extremely stressful for most working parents, and the new system has certainly alleviated much of this. From a business perspective, I've experienced a much busier morning trade to the extent that I now bring an extra member of staff in for the first hour. And so on. Garda Síochána, from a Garda perspective, there have been very few parking issues in the area of the school, which frees up resources and allows Gardaí to focus their efforts on other parts of the community. National Transport Authority, this project has been important in showing how space can be managed differently, rebalancing priority away from vehicles and towards community while helping people adjust and think about their car journeys. So there's plenty more, but I'll leave you with that picture there, and if anybody's any questions, feel free. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. That was absolutely brilliant, and there are loads of questions coming in. I'm personally really impressed with the integrated approach that the School Streets program did. I mean, it's not just about closing a street. I mean, you're opening a street, but it's just integrating it with the walking buses, the cycling bus, bringing business to the local community with the parking tags, and the air pollution monitoring, and just having the data for the rain, it was really, wow, very interesting. So thank you so much for that. Lots of questions coming in. Hopefully we can get to most of them, but we will, we might have to, we might not be able to get to all of them, and if that's the case, we will try and get email answers to people if that's possible. So we'll start off with Jane, if that's possible. Jane, there's a question from Emma Colhill. She's wanting to know what percentage of principals responded to your survey. And I want to follow that up with how, like, if someone wanted to get a walking, an audit for their school, what would they need to do to apply to get a walkability audit?
Okay, so we sent out the survey to 4,000 of our 4,000 schools. Now we didn't, you know, statistically we still had a good enough response. We got, I'd say, about altogether about 400 responses through social media and then through our hard survey, you know, but this, remember, was in June. You know, I think we hoped to have had a better response if it was normal time, but this was June, schools had closed down, and the response we felt was a good response based on the fact that schools were closed and everybody was dealing with the COVID situation. So I suppose around a 10% response rate.
And was it mainly primary schools or secondary schools? Or
it's a mix. Our network would be representative of the whole school network. And in terms of the walkability audit, you know, we have done the audits for nearly 1,600 plus schools. So there are audits there for those schools. But if any school wants the audit, like, they can get in touch with us. We have been working with the National Transport Authority to do a national walkability audit template. And we've been doing that in partnership with Age Friendly Ireland. And that template would therefore be available for anyone in the community to do. However, we're more focused on kind of looking at it through ArcGIS and having it as a kind of walkability tool. That's a digital tool now that we're using it through. But yeah, get in touch with us and, you know, we can see if we can help you.
So the school doesn't need to be, for example, applying for their travel flag at the moment or...
Well, look, we only have a certain number of staff, you know, we have a certain number of staff, but at the same time, you know, I think, you know, we are there to support schools. There's a lot of schools that are coming to us who aren't, you know, doing the theme of travel at the moment. So, you know, if we have the capacity, we'd definitely be able to assist a school.
Great, thank you. The next question is from Colin Walsh, and it's to Antonia and Jane, but I think I'd like to open it up to Andrew as well. Just say, is applying for a school zone a good way to initiate the school street process? Like, should you go for a school zone first and then from there try to broaden it out to having a school street?
Yeah, I suppose I'll go first. We started with implementing the school zone because they were a quicker one to implement. You know, as our capacity increases, or if there's I suppose if that builds the support locally and they want it, then we will look at that. Yeah, but I would say it's a really good start to get in and get the school zone first, and it's a great starting point. Yeah.
Andrew, would you agree with that? Do you think that's
Yeah. Well, what I'd say is it's horses for courses. So a school street, you need certain criteria to actually be able to implement it. It's having a road network around it where you can actually close a discrete section of road and hand it over without impacting too dramatically on either residents or something like a bus route. So you wouldn't implement a school street on a bus route, whereas you could implement a school zone on a bus route or on a trafficked road, a through road or whatever. But where it's within, say, a housing estate with an isolated number of residents, that you can either accommodate them or facilitate their movements, or they're willing to not move in and out of the zone within the time that the street is closed, well then, you know, you've got buy-in. But that's what I'd say, it's horses for courses. And the process of closing the road is obviously a little bit more engaged. You have to be a lot more engaged with the overall community.
Thank you. So the next question is also for Antonia. It's from Siles, your name, correctly. So Antonia, you mentioned that the Sustainable Mobility Team in Dublin City Council was part of the initial discussions with Dublin City Council and the NTA and Green Schools. So how big is the team with Dublin City Council, and are resources an issue, and are there challenges rolling out the active travel infrastructure quickly and at scale?
There had been about 22 people, I think, in sustainable mobility and projects. A few have moved over to to COVID mobility, but all the projects are carrying on in sustainable mobility. A lot of the delays tend to be around, it's always more than just a cycle project. There's drainage issues, and, there could be land issues as well, particularly around kind of Royal Canal maybe, and working with Irish Rail. And so they can cause some of the delays, and obviously there's other, people who feel that it will negatively impact them. So kind of those consultation procedures can be quite timely, so that tends to be the reason, and people will be familiar with the Liffey cycle route and the different options and all of that, and how long it takes to try and get the best design, I suppose, that's going to suit and be suitable for the greatest amount of people. They tend to be the things that hold up the projects, I suppose, more than resources. But we had been, prior to COVID, and I know Chris Mansera's team is still pushing this forward to develop a sustainable urban mobility plan, which would have been more, I suppose, of a, the policy and how we're going to develop it to get more the buy-in on the bigger things, so then you're not fighting about, I suppose, not having so many conversations about maybe some of the smaller issues then going down. But the COVID mobility interventions have been interesting, because we've been able to put a lot of stuff in as temporary measures and on trial, so we're getting to see how they work out, and then hopefully a lot of them can become more permanent. So hopefully COVID has been an opportunity for us to get in there and get the trials done, so there'll be less opposition then in the long run.
You find now that these school zones have opened up that you're getting more, you're getting a lot more kind of interest from other schools now wanting this, like they're seeing the changes and they're saying, we want this too?
Yeah, definitely. And the more people see it and what it looks like, I think people have to visualize it before they realize, actually, I want this. So we're trying to gather as much evidence as we can about that, those pictures of the kids walking and cycling to school. Andrew's pictures were brilliant there to show the before and after, and actually to show that negative impact didn't happen even on the side roads that people might have expected. I think when you're able to kind of show that with with evidence, that really helps people. But but to answer your question, I suppose there's about 220 primary schools in Dublin City. We invited them all to express interest in a school zone. We've had 60 expressions back, so that's quite a high percentage.
Yeah, wow. Thank you. Andrew, there's another question here for you. I'll kind of try and put them two together. Let's see. Apologies. So a question from Alison Phillips, and she wants to know, how do you monitor the air quality, road safety, street environment, and behaviors around the school street?
Sorry, Cynthia, how do we monitor the air quality, is it?
The air quality, the road safety, the street environment, and the behaviors. So what are the different monitoring programs that you have in place?
Yeah, so for the air quality, we had an AQ mesh unit installed at the corner of the Royals and Grove Road, which is still a trafficable section of the road on the eastern side of where the school is. So where the bus would still drop off the kids, where parents are still circulating in their cars and so on. So it was an area that you're not monitoring a zone that you're going from being trafficable to being non-trafficable, in which case that there's going to be a dramatic difference. In this situation, we wanted to see, is there a change in people's behaviour and a reduction in car traffic coming into that zone at all, which there was. And that showed a 20% reduction overall in the nitrogen dioxide levels and the particulate matter levels. So what we were seeing using that unit was that there was benefits overall in an area that's still trafficable. In relation to behaviours and road safety issues, we haven't had any accidents and anything like that in the zone. We've had a couple of people that have breached the zone in cars that are driving up on the footpath to get around the bollards. driving through the bollards, in one case with a stolen car, and we got caught at the bollards and still managed to get the car through. But An Garda Síochána followed all those situations up, and they chased down the prosecution on those. But overall, I mean, that wasn't something that the school street situation had brought about. It was a situation that would have happened regardless. The issues of road safety, like we haven't had any issues with the kids. It's obviously a safer zone. Prior to this happening, there was kids stepping out between cars, out off the footpaths, stepping between cars, and obviously a child being between 1 metre and say 1.5 metres high, stepping out between a car, they're not visible to a car that's coming on at them, nor can they see the oncoming traffic. So we know from observations that it's a much safer zone. In terms of people's perception of it and how they're dealing with it, we surveyed all of the parents and residents. We went down and got feedback surveys then afterwards to see if there was any issues that we had to resolve or what was out there. And like what Antonia is saying there, you're iterating as well as you're going to make sure that you've picked up any bits and pieces that are still outstanding. Because like anything else, you can't change something as dramatic as this and then not expect other things to have to change that you haven't maybe anticipated. And so it is making sure that you pick up those bits and pieces afterwards. And we do that by way of surveys and constant communication with the community and with the principals of the two adjacent schools.
Brilliant. Thank you. Do we have time for any more questions, Conor? Or no?
I'm really conscious of the time, and I kind of promised each of our participants, or each of the presenters, I mean, that we would keep it to the hour. There really is quite a volume of questions coming in. So is it possible that we might be like, and if you have to go to another meeting, I fully appreciate it, but if it's possible to stay on for maybe another 10 minutes, and I swear I'll kill it, is that okay? Jane, Andrew and Antonia, is that okay? Andrew, is that okay as well? Oh, Andrew's frozen. All right, okay. Andrew, is it? Oh, yeah, cool. Okay, right, okay. It's just that there's I was not expecting this amount of feedback. I suggest, Cynthia, we're not going to get through all of them. So if
we're not. I'm trying to
tail and the donkey. Yeah. Just while you're going through it, Andrew, we've spoken before, and you were talking about the kind of change management aspect of it, and how new is that in Ireland? Maybe if you could just, I don't know. I know that would take the 10 minutes in its entirety, but just like really briefly, if that's at all possible. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Like the reality of these situations is the level of engineering that's involved is relatively low in comparison to the amount of engagement that needs to happen, and it is about change management. It's about changing people's perceptions. It's dealing with people's fear of what's going to happen. Like people will tell you that chaos will ensue as soon as you close a small section of road. Like the word chaos is used ad nauseum in these situations, and the reality of it is that chaos doesn't happen. In fact, if you look at an awful lot of the areas, both from a perspective, numbers of cars, air quality, there's a huge benefit overall of changing people's behaviours in relation to this. But it's the fear that people have of taking away something that they're so used to having for so long, and the idea of having two-way traffic on all of our roads and pedestrians being pushed to the side of all of our roads, and similarly with cyclists, we need to kind of start looking at that and reprioritising how streets in particular are being utilised. But managing people's expectations in and around that and what's going to happen, that is a really, really important part. Early engagement, community involvement, I would say, is something that can save you probably an awful lot of angst in the long run, where people feel like they have being engaged in the process, but also have added to it and they have a buy-in to it. You get a lot more from that sort of engagement. But a lot of the time, you will, as the local authority or whatever, as the road safety authority, you have to make these decisions and move forward to try and implement these things, because otherwise we would do nothing with the level of correspondence that you receive and maybe negative reaction to it.
So just another question. So do you think having rolled out the first school street, do you think it's now going to be easier to roll out similar to other schools in the Fingal County Council area? Or is this still kind of a process and you're still kind of just watching what's happening in Malahide?
I suppose the difference there, Cindy, is that you're going from having a situation where they've no marker, they've nothing to compare to. It's the first time it's been introduced, to introducing something and then being able to show a different school or a different community, well, this is what's happened over here, these are the benefits that we've taken from it, And that's why we did as many studies as we have done, so that you're able to actually articulate what the consequence of making that change is, and whether it's a positive or negative. Like this, there's pluses and minuses to all these things, but as long as you're providing a benefit to everybody, will then show it has a better outcome. As well as that, being able to show them and get feedback from the students themselves, and the input from the students, I'd say, was critical to the whole thing, and their desire for change was paramount in all of this. So when we went and surveyed the residents and maybe the businesses, there was very much a level of concern. But when we surveyed the children, their desire and how they got to school versus how they wanted to get to school, we put that statistic up, and it's very stark when you look at 900 students giving you a response versus maybe 20 residents giving you a more negative response. So having that input from the kids was really, really important. And so again, taking it to other schools, it would give you more validation for doing it.
And Antonia, can I just ask you, was there a similar survey done for the school zones outside the two schools, where the school zones were done, for getting the input from the students as to how they wanted to come to school? And have you noticed then a modal shift now, once the school zones have been implemented, in how children are now coming to school?
I might actually pass that one over to Jane, because Green Schools and the NTA had suggested some of the initial schools because they had worked closely with them already.
Yeah, thanks, Antonia. So I suppose our model is one of behaviour change. So, I mean, everything that Andrew says is what we do kind of with schools around the country. You know, we talk to the students, we do baseline surveys with them, you know, at the beginning of the process. We look at what they want, how they want to get to school. And then after they're involved in Green Schools, we also survey them again to find out the changes. So we're always looking at how the kids want to get to school and how we can support them in walking or cycling to school. And we would have done that on all the schools that have got the school zones. And I suppose just coming back to the school streets idea, and I think it's a brilliant idea, brilliant initiative. However, we have to get to a point where we don't need school streets necessarily, you know, where we have parents bringing their kids to school, walking and cycling, and there isn't a need to have that, you know, exclusion zone for the car. So I think we're trying to do that, like in the schools that we work with, because there are a whole multitude of schools with very different, you know, issues outside their schools. They're on heavily congested zones, or they're in high speed, you know, routes, or they're on a network that will never have a school street. So for us, you know, the school street is the holy grail, but for, you know, it's not necessarily appropriate for everyone. So if we pull back and use the same type of methods that Andrew used in the school streets, the consultation and the raising awareness and the engagement with the schools and the surveys and all of those things, hopefully, you know, we see less cars, and we're really positive. We feel that there's been a huge change attitudinally, you know, across the country over the last few years, and hopefully that will continue.
Just to follow up, there's been a couple of questions about bike buses, and so do you use for bike buses then that require volunteer marshals to provide a safe and positive and viable solution to facilitate active travel? Jane.
Just if I think bike buses are good, or what? Sorry.
Yeah, so do you think they're a viable alternative to facilitate, you know, versus if the school can't have a school zone, you can't have a school street, I mean, and then parents are putting together bike buses.
I think bike buses are fantastic, and we've worked with a lot of the people who have set up the bike buses. I think the key thing with the bike bus is that it's the parents who have taken it on and they've run with it, and it just shows that really over the last decade people have become much more aware of what the alternatives are, and the alternatives are now the norm, you know, walking and cycling. So getting the parents to actively pursue it is fantastic, because then they're much more involved in talking about why they want better infrastructure. And I suppose that's what you can see with the number of new cycling advocacy groups around the country. So bike buses definitely, I think they're probably an interim thing. I don't know if they'll, exist maybe in 5 or 10 years time, because hopefully by then we will have had a much better network of cycle lanes, possibly quieter routes, less people, driving their car in commuting times. But definitely in the interim, they're fantastic.
I'm going to ask one final question to all the panelists, and just to say, and just leave it to one thing. What is one thing that you would like to see change, either at a systems level or process level, that would help roll out basically safe cycling for kids, active travel for kids to get to school? So if each one of you could just chime in with the one thing that you would like to see.
I personally, I would like to see, am I allowed to say banning cars? I know, can't say that. But,
you can.
No. Look, I have a car. But no, what I'd like to see is much more capacity being built in the local authorities. I think the local authorities are doing amazing work, and they're pulled in a million different ways. And I think there's a real appetite there in local authorities to do this. So it's really about local authorities working in collaboration with people like us and other groups. I suppose that's what I'd like to see.
Andrew?
Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer because it's a very complex arrangement of things that have to come together to change how people behave. But ultimately, what is required, I think, is behavioural change. What we've seen from the studies that we carried out both here and for New Street, etc. Most people, 75% of people are travelling less than 1 kilometre by car. Whether that's going to football training, going to school, whether it's going to the shop. For those local trips, people are taking their car. And maybe going back to the last point was that if there was better infrastructure, people may cycle or walk or run to their locality instead. We are in the process of rolling out a series of schemes to help that happen. But ultimately, it's changing people's behaviour. I mean, it wasn't always like this. We always probably had the road network that we have. But people historically, maybe up until the 80s or early 90s, and the car ownership and car usage has just climbed exponentially. And people are using the car for very short trips when they could take other forms of transport, be it cycling or scooting or walking. And football clubs are every bit equivalent to schools. Like people are driving to their local home matches and driving to training as opposed to walking or cycling down. So it is a behavioural change. And we're running another campaign called Gearing Up for Training to try to encourage clubs to get their children's groups to walk or cycle to school. So that would be my behavioural change.
Brilliant, thank you. My son is the only kid who cycles to football training, so I hear you on that one. So, Antonio, please, if you want to.
Yeah, it's similar to what the guys are saying, but I do think there's been a shift as well, even kind of within councils, to put more emphasis on the softer measures and the communication measures and those kind of outreach things. The infrastructure will come, but obviously it's slower. But cars automatically slow down when they see a cycle bus go by, and it's changing that mindset, and it's changing the culture. So I think that emphasis and growing the numbers of people and growing, I suppose, the as Andrew said, it's it's very small, very not a lot of kind of engineering stuff that was required for the school street, but it's a lot of the engagement stuff. So I think that engagement piece is maybe something that has started to kind of come into itself in local authorities, and I think that's something to build, and I think that will help with the culture change and outreach.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. I think, Conor, did you want to say a last couple of words?
Yeah, I just copy link location. Sorry, I'm just pasting in. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, there's our 4th webinar in the series, and it's on active travel, public health and resilience. And it's at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. It's our first breakfast webinar. I offered breakfast webinars hoping nobody would take us up on it, but hey, it's great, right? Okay, we'll all have our conflicts together. So it has Sabrina Decker, the climate action coordinator from Dublin City Council, Mary Caulfield, Dublin Cycling Campaign advocate, and and Dr. Colin Byrne, a consultant geriatrician and general physician, who's researching the connection between air pollution and strokes. And it's been chaired by Sheila Gannan. And I've just shared the link to register for that in the chat. And I'd really like to thank Cynthia, who's done a fantastic job of literally wading through and digesting all of the questions and feedback that's come in from an amazing audience. So thanks a million. And in particular, I'd really like to thank Antonia, Jane, and Andrew. Thanks very much. We'll see you at the next one, hopefully. Right. Bye.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank you.
brilliant.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, cool. Bye.
Thanks, Emil.
Bye.